Just pin this eyeball emoji. Let's get some thoughts on that from the man that tweeted it out. College Football Enquirer Stephen Godfrey back to explain. All right, give it to me, man. Why do we have eyeball emojis out there? What are we hinting at?
That's the history. That's a thing I started doing because I stopped breaking coaching news, and I would use the eyeball emoji to say, "Hey, you need to pay attention today." Now, the reason why I said just pin this, being a little facetious or overdramatic, was it's going to be a bloodbath here for the next couple of weeks, guys. So rather than me drop it 2 hours before something happens, let's just keep it pinned, okay? Nobody's safe. Buyouts don't exist anymore. And I think we're going to see some major programs with some frustrated fan bases. I don't know, maybe a co-host of the show could express her feelings about a frustrated fan base right now. You're going to see some people act like they're not high dollar figures attached to dismissing some of these coaches and moving on.
I mean, we've already had, 9 head coaches in college football get fired? It's not even Halloween.
Yes.
It's already spooky season.
This was supposed to be the year that didn't happen anymore. Remember that, guys? You remember that whole narrative over the offseason? Like, oh, you know what? The way it's structured now, there's going to be so many teams in the playoff. You don't have to worry about this. And, the portal's going to affect that. The exact reverse has happened. There's a psychological change going on amongst those people with deep pockets in college football. And what they are deciding is, rather than worry about where the money's going to come from, the bigger risk right now is to look like you are complacent. Because you remember last year's coaching search cycle? It was really, really thin. The Southeastern Conference did not replace a coach for the first time in, I think, 6 or 7 years, which is kind of unheard of. And now we're on the brink of maybe as many 4 or 5 in that league alone.
So how much do you believe the successes of Vanderbilt and Indiana and Georgia Tech have expedited this process? How much hotter are the seats of Brian Kelly and Mike Norvell and Brent Venables and Lincoln Riley because these lower tier programs are legitimate college football playoff contenders?
I like that as a hypothesis. Nobody's going to admit that right now because it's very uncomfortable to do so. But I like that idea because college football, as a rule, hates a usurper, which is just a fancy way of saying that when someone who we feel like in college football amongst the traditional programs and the helmets, right? If we feel like one of those schools doesn't belong and it starts having success, we find a way to correct that. We don't like that as an industry. We never have. We probably never will. But because of the sort of triple threat of revenue sharing, NIL, and the portal all kind of happened at once, and there was no enforcement around it because of what was going on in Washington, D.C., and the NCAA's just sort of general fecklessness, we had this sort of crazy moment. We've had 30 years of change in about 3 seasons. So right now we're seeing schools where, hey, the value of an education at Vanderbilt or Georgia Tech has always been really good, right? And they produce a lot of deep-pocketed alumni, right? So what if those people now finally could legitimately contribute directly to the football program? You're seeing the result of that. Turns out that rich schools want to win too. And they want to be able to write a check and maybe show it on their taxes, unlike the old bagman days. And you are seeing schools that by our standards and our generation of football fandom normally have no business doing this. Like Indiana's for real, guys. They are a real program. They are probably the 3rd best program in the country right now behind Alabama and Ohio State.
3rd best program.
Jeez.
Define what you mean by 3rd best program.
Playing football currently on October 20th, 2025, year of our Lord. I'm not saying that they are the 3rd best program year in and year out. I would talk about something like Oregon. There are other schools that we can discuss, right? But as of right now, if we had the playoff tomorrow, I think Indiana is the 3rd best program playing football right now.
So how has Indiana been able to figure it out, Vandy, all these things? You make a very smart point with that. Why haven't the Michigan States and Wisconsins and Auburns and Floridas figured out the same thing? Like, how do we sit in this world where the middle class is suddenly wildly changed in college football?
I don't have a comfortable or polite way of saying this. You have to be comfortable paying kids money, and that has not caught up in a lot of cultures in college football. And if you were previously successful by not doing that, a lot of people who write the checks feel like, well, we shouldn't be paying the labor. Indiana worked out an aggressive, selfless system to go out. Now, first off, they hired a great coach who, by the way, technically comes off the Saban tree. He was an assistant on the very first Alabama team in 2007 under Nick Saban. He toiled in the FCS. He took a lot of jobs that we don't talk about, in the news. And then he kind of came in as a fully formed program manager who was really good at evaluating talent and also good at working in the margins, right? Finding the 2 stars who probably should be 3 or 4, 3 stars who should be 5. And they put together a really aggressive budget with a legitimate commitment to football in Indiana. There's a lot of money behind this, guys. The answer to most questions in college football is money. Why isn't this happening? Why didn't this happen correctly? It's either money that hasn't been spent or money that was spent the wrong way. Indiana is doing it correctly right now. And I think the Oregon win a couple weeks ago has at least muted some of the nonsense criticism. Oh, they didn't play anybody, Paul, all that kind of stuff. Indiana is as legit a team in a Power 2 conference as anybody else right now. And they would give Ohio State a game. They would give Alabama a game. They would give I guess right now we'd say maybe Texas A&M. They are legitimate because they have figured out the new rules better and faster than some of the legacy brands. This sport does not care about the logo on your helmet. We think it does. But if you're fast and you have ingenuity and you put money in the right places at the right time, you can beat the old guard. Now, the problem is, like I said at the top of the segment, the old guard will eventually catch up, right? So we can talk about LSU for a second. Down, frustrated, really poor implementation of NIL philosophically. Brian Kelly's not going to be the guy probably for the next age of college football, but LSU was caught in a weird period of time where people were still hiring to answer Nick Saban. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like you were either hiring a Saban guy or a guy who could beat Saban. And in LSU's case specifically, you were hiring a guy because you were so frustrated with Ed Orgeron, who gave you a perfect season in 19, but was woefully inconsistent after that. They wanted their Nick Saban back. Psychologically, I don't know if you agree with me or not, psychologically, LSU has always been in this sort of existential identity crisis for losing Nick Saban and watching him win all those titles. So they went after this guy who was a statesman and a politician, right? The problem was he probably could have done a great job in the pre-NIL, the pre-portal era, the long-term build culture, because he did a good job with that at Notre Dame. We don't live in that world anymore. You are rebuilding your roster in perpetuity, which means every 12 months, you're going to have a 45% turnover at best. And that's a good situation. I don't think Brian Kelly's the right guy for that, but there's also, I could say that about probably 20 or 30 head coaches right now at the top of the game, at the highest levels of college football. So what do you do? Do you eat this giant buyout? Do you go and find someone else? The trick right now is that, actually, let me just ask you guys, who would you hire at LSU right now? Who do you like if you had to replace Brian Kelly right now? Who do you go chase?
Oh, see, that's a fascinating question because I don't know. Because following Brian Kelly, a guy who'd been to the college football playoff, who had coached a national championship, hiring that next hot, young, up-and-coming coordinator doesn't feel satisfactory. What are you going to hire? James Franklin? And get the exact same results that you've been getting?
Oh, God. Hey, please let me be there if they hire James Franklin. Let me hang out at the Baton Rouge Country Club for a week if they hire James Franklin. That's my kind of story.
My diploma back, Godfrey. I would hang out.
I would shadow Scott Woodward around the Baton Rouge Country Club for a week if they hired James Franklin. Oh, man, I could win a Pulitzer off that. That's a wonderful suggestion. The problem, and I kind of did this as an exercise. We talked a little bit about this on the College Football Enquirer on Yahoo, on the Fast Network. Tune in. That was a pretty good ad read, right?
That was well done.
Thank you. You guys are the professionals here. We talked about this, and Andy Staples, my co-host, brought up the idea. Do you guys remember when Urban Meyer was at Utah in the 2000s, and he was the consensus guy? Florida got him, Notre Dame wanted him, but everybody in college football could agree on the guy. We don't really have an archetype right now. So a lot of these jobs are going to open, and a lot of people are going to try and find the answer for the next generation of college football at their particular big university. But the problem is, we don't really have a tree. We had the Saban tree. You either hired a guy who could beat Saban, right? So Gus Malzahn or Hugh Freeze, or you hired a guy who was like Saban. So Kirby Smart, and then on down the line of varying Saban assistants who may have worked out decent, bad, great, whatever. Who do you hire right now? I would hire tomorrow, if I had a football program that had top end money, I would hire Dan Lanning. But I don't think Dan Lanning is going to go anywhere in the short term. His contract makes it pretty hard for that to happen. But do you hire Will Stein, his offensive coordinator? That feels premature, right? To your point, we're not necessarily at that point where it feels like we're just going to grab one of his guys. I might hire Kenny Dillingham, too, from Arizona State. But if I'm in the SEC, does Arizona State's resume, is that flashy and sexy enough for me? I don't know. But Kenny Dillingham has done this one thing that like a Brian Kelly never could. He doesn't have Brian Kelly's win-loss record or his prestige, but he damn sure can find things in the portal and use NIL and utilize social media in a way that some of these legacy head coaches can't. But are we hiring Kenny Dillingham somewhere? We might hire him at Florida State. I know they just came out with a statement about 30 minutes ago saying they're gonna keep Mike Norvell. If you believe that, I have some lovely investment properties for you. They'll keep him for the next couple of weeks, but things in Tallahassee have never been worse. So we don't really have a tree. So what you're going to see in the short term is poaching. You're going to see sitting head coaches take mega deals to go to another school. We saw a little bit of that in the 21 cycle, 22. I think you're going to see more of it until the industry can catch up with the supply and demand problem of head coaching.
So let's take that logic and apply it to Florida, because I have heard Lane Kiffin to Gainesville, Florida fans clamoring for that for years, like for 2 years now. One, is Lane Kiffin that caliber of coach? Two, if you're Lane Kiffin, is Florida a better job than Ole Miss right now?
Technically, yes. I am an alumni of that university. And technically, yes. No matter what happens, I think there will always be a little bit of an existential divide between haves and have-nots in the Southeastern Conference. Now, the margin between haves and have-nots has never been smaller, because you might have a situation where Clark Lee is recruited by Penn State, and Clark Lee might opt to stay at Vanderbilt. How strange would that be? That's just a hypothetical here. So the margin between these jobs has never been smaller. But I do think if you had to just break it all down on paper, Florida is marginally better for head coach X, not necessarily Lane Kiffin, but just any candidate coming in. Now, it's not like it was 5 or 10 or even 2 years ago when you saw Lane Kiffin sort of rebuke Auburn. This is going to be a Lane Kiffin question. And I think here's what's really interesting to me, watching the Lane Kiffin glow up in PR the last couple of years. Lane Kiffin was not the caliber of coach that Florida wanted, and I know that because that's what Florida told people during the last cycle when they were looking at coaches, and a lot of Florida fans said, oh, we would really like Lane Kiffin. He's got the swagger. He's got the Spurrier thing, right? They said, no, absolutely not. Because of the off-field stuff. You guys remember all the rumors at Alabama. You remember the off-field behavior, the divorce, just kind of let's just say, for the sake of not getting sued, just messiness. There's some messiness around his character. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair.
He was like a reality show character. Okay. Isn't it interesting to me, that all we hear about from Lane Kiffin now is yoga and Bible verses, and ESPN just produced an entire SEC network documentary about how he's a changed man and he's this enigma and he's calmer. Here's why that's genius manufacturing. That's genius narrative construction. By the way, on the part of Lane and his representation at CAA. If you're Ole Miss, you feel like, oh, you know what? All Lane needed was to move to Oxford, Mississippi, and just like he's home now and his family loves it and all this crap that I hear from Oxford, right? So it's great because it reaffirms all of the inherent bias of the school that employs him, and they worship him like a king. Don't get it twisted. They would be gutted if he left, all right? But simultaneously, if you're in a leadership position in a place like Florida where you previously thought, oh, this guy's a little spicy, he's a little sketchy off the field, I don't know, he's inconsistent. Now you have the actual SEC network going to bat for him and saying he's a changed man, he's mature, he's grown into this role, look how different he is. And on top of that, this is a one-loss team on the verge of a playoff bid. And I don't care how things have changed a lot in 3 years, like I've said. You take Ole Miss to the playoff, that's not supposed to happen. That's a usurper. That's something that shouldn't happen in college football. And it's going to make you look like a miracle worker. So here's the good news for Lane, barring him just bottoming out in November. He's in the best possible situation he could be. And I don't know what works better for him. If it's Gainesville and he's just closer to his boat down in Miami, or if it's staying in Mississippi with the family, because I do know the family is sort of dug in to Oxford. Either way, I think it's fine because Ole Miss is going to continue to give him whatever he wants within reason. They have done this so far. It would be fascinating to me if he goes to Florida because, and I'm going to jump forward and probably put too much in this segment, Auburn is going to open, okay? Auburn believes they're going to get John Summerall from Tulane. If Ole Miss is open and Auburn is open, John Summerall is going to have a more aggressive market for him than Lane Kiffin will. So we are going to see a feeding frenzy out of panic and desperation in the next 6 or so weeks. So yeah, Kiffin holds all the cards. By virtue, so does Jimmy Sexton, which, by the way, did you guys see Jimmy Sexton coming out of the tunnel with Lane at Georgia this weekend? They're not even subtle about this stuff. This is a sport within a sport. I could talk for hours about this.
You don't have to be Pablo, by the way, to uncover the CAA relationships with ESPN behind the scenes. You want to get a friendly documentary made at ESPN, CAA is helpful for that.
It ain't that hard.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest, too.
I mean, 100%. So, okay, before we get you out of here, I know we got to, but real quick, all this conversation is really cute. Are we just glossing over the fact that Ohio State's going to win the national championship in a very boring way?
It's very possible. Although I will say, like, that Alabama War Machine shirt, it showed up like a month late, but oh damn! Like, okay, guys, here we go again. For all the change that we just talked. So let me kill the whole segment here. All the change, and Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt are going to the playoff. Guess what? The national title is going to be. Right
Ohio
now,
State, Alabama.
It's Ohio State. Oh, without a doubt. Like, I mean, it's brutal right now. They're both gearing up to like that foregone conclusion where they both just sort of play 3/4 like trash compactor football, kind of vintage, like first era Saban and Tuscaloosa. Both of them kind of have that mentality right now. And they're like, you know what? We don't need to be flashy. We don't need to win. We don't need to be out there pitching the media. We don't need style points. We will just be the most like boring and reductive defense and just sort of clamp you down for 3/4. And in Bama's case right now, they probably have the Heisman winner at quarterback. So we're just going to out-talent you and be really boring about the way we do it. That has not changed. The very top of the sport still pretty much. The very, very tip top is the same. The world will get over a Georgia Tech Indiana playoff game. We'll all make it.
And then we'll end up with the championship game that is boring, and everybody will say
that's what
it was the brand.
That's what we always do.
It's inevitable. It is classic.